Good afternoon. On behalf of the MIT Sloan Boston Alumni Association and the MIT Center for Digital Business, I'm Alan Tate, and I am your host today for this 3 o'clock breakout session on maximizing and communicating the business value of IT. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to our panel moderator from Forrester Research, Chip Gliedman.
Thank you, Alan. So at Forrester, we believe that we're right now at an inflection point where we've worked for years to optimize technology to deliver, the best value for the money, in a sense. But all of the trends that you've been hearing about, social, mobile, innovation, disruption, are going to create new opportunities and new challenges for CIOs. The notion of what is value is likely going to change dramatically as we move from this notion of effectiveness and efficiency to one of customer engagement and business partnership. And that's the case whether you're business to consumer, business to business, or government to constituent. There's an entirely new set of expectations that these external people are putting on your organizations. And therefore, there have to be new expectations in terms of how you deliver value. And sort of to address that topic of how CIOs currently and should deliver value, I'm joined by my 4 panelists. I'm joined on my left by Brook Colangelo, who's SVP and CIO of Houghton, Mifflin, Harcourt. Harry Moseley, CIO and Managing Director of KPMG. Martyn Wiltshire, who's Director of Strategic IT Initiatives at SanDisk, and Todd Tucker, who's Research Director for the Technology Business Management Council. So gentlemen, value. Let me ask a simple question. What are you measured on today as CIOs? What do they use to judge your performance? What metrics?
Start. Sure. Well, first, thanks. I'm really excited to be here. So thanks for having me. And I actually pondered about thinking something dramatic to say here, and it's really simple at HMH. I'm measured on the same things that my CEO is measured on. And that's across our entire sort of leadership team. Is we all have the same metrics, the macro level metrics. Now, sales may have more specific details, and I have, I think one metric on an SAP upgrade this year and a few other sort of key technology issues. But overall, we're bringing the company together as one, and technology is not a service provider. We are the business, right? And so that is essentially, why we have the same sort of top line, same metrics, same market share numbers, all of that goes across the entire business.
And Harry, you're in a very different business in a sense. You're a consulting organization, and intellectual property is your asset. How do they judge your performance?
Yeah, at KPMG, as we're 25,000 people in professional services, one of the things that we're very focused on is, sort of productivity, efficiency, and effectiveness. And I think one of the things, the way my superiors look at my performance is sort of how much in front of the organization can we be from a leading perspective in terms of identifying technologies, identifying innovative technologies, bringing them into the firm, and then creating solutions before they're asked, so being one step ahead of the curve. So that's a key focus of mine, as well as obviously running the day-to-day.
Right, yeah.
Because when the lights go out, that's really bad.
Quantity, quality plays well with others.
Yeah.
Martyn, you're in a slightly different role, but...
Yeah, so at SanDisk, we're a big global company. We have a lot of products going to market quickly. From the IT CIO organization, we're certainly measured on rapid execution, delivery of solutions that will improve business productivity and business partnership. And I think that what we don't talk about so much anymore, the table stakes, is really service availability. That can have a very big impact on the career or lifespan of any CIO, but it's not something that we talk about in the CIO office to the executive team.
Is that because it works really well?
Exactly. That's right.
And Todd, actually, you're a slightly different role also.
Yeah.
You're representing, in a sense, the Technology Business Management Council, of however many hundred CIOs. So are you hearing, what are you hearing about how their role and how they're judged today?
I would say it's evolving, that the role for a lot of CIOs is one of driving a transformation of their own IT organization to be more of a service provider and a value partner, and as a result, their metrics for showing value, for measuring and managing it, are also changing. And Chip, as you know, we engaged you and Khalid from Forrester to do some research around this, and what I love is the outcome was that there needs to be a balanced set of metrics. Some of those are very business outcome centric that are maybe indirectly affected by IT. Some are more service delivery metrics that are directly managed by IT, and some are more operational metrics, but it's a portfolio of metrics that should be used.
Yeah, a balanced scorecard of some sort.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The notion of delivering at all of the different levels of value. So I asked you, obviously, how you're measured today. There's sort of two sides to that. Has it changed? And is where you are today appropriate for tomorrow? So are you in the middle of a migration towards something even further? It sounds like you're probably as far along as you could be. But at least for the other two, do you see more of a move away from the operational or towards the business value? Do you see more of a tying of the technology away from the cost to the delivery?
Yeah, well, certainly in the sense at KPMG, it's kind of like our focus is much more about how we can be integrated with the business, so we can be, quote, at the table with the business. And so we're driving very hard in that space right now and being very successful at it. We're also at the boardroom table. It was kind of interesting to have a conversation last night with our deputy chairman where, sort of a year ago it was kind of hard to get time at the boardroom table on a quarterly basis, and then the conversation last night was along the lines of, we should do this monthly. So you can see that the shift is changing and how technology is actually getting integrated and being valued by the organization. So I think that was thumbs up for our team.
Are they pulling you along, or are you finally getting the light bulb going off and have now demonstrated that that's actually, that there is value to this stuff that they keep putting money in?
Yeah, I think it's the latter.
Okay.
When I go back to a presentation I made to our Strategic Investments Committee a while back, it's kind of like I talked about a certain model that we were developing, and they came back and said, well, that's fantastic. Why don't you sort of share that with a larger group of people? And we said, well, rather than do that, why don't we just sort of do something and then show it as opposed to present it all the time? So.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things we found, especially talking to business leaders, is one of the biggest complaints with IT organizations and IT leadership is a lack of urgency. That takes too long. The cycle times are too long. Businesses are changing products every 6-9 months. They're changing marketing campaigns every 6-9 weeks. IT is taking 6-9 months to say no. The notion of agility is now, at least in the business mind, I think a key measure of value. Have you begun to embrace the notion, around to that transformation away from cost centricity towards business agility? Are you talking about showing value, getting uptick in the notion of investing more in the technology to create business flexibility?
So, at HMH, we're a global K-12 education provider, and content is the core of our business, but the underlying technology is how we deliver it, and I think you're absolutely right, and it was my experience at the White House that folks had that same sort of mentality of like, you gotta move faster, come on, the economy's changing, we gotta get this technology. And the same is at HMH, we're at this incredible inflection point in education and in ed tech. And so one of the first things that I did when I came on board about 1.5 years ago was I took Agile Methodology, and that's great, and we love it in development. We're applying it across the entire spectrum inside of our group called the technology group. And the way we've done it is that we have everybody go through user story training so that they see through the eyes of the user, and they apply the same sort of iterative process to producing any type of work. If it's any conversation, if it's problem solving a budget issue, it starts with post-notes on a wall rather than this sort of like, let's all get in a room and think back about how we're gonna do this in 18 months. Because I think that patience is gone. Like, the marketplace isn't even patient for like the iPhone 6 right now. We're all like, it has to be June, not August, right? And Apple moves it back from September to August now, or so the rumors say. But we all have this instant gratification issue, hence the Amazon and the drones. But I think that same methodology has to get applied inside of technology, because we can't have this long conversation. We can't have this, like, give me the requirements, I'll come back. And as I came into IT, requirements has got to be the nastiest word. Like, if it was trending on Twitter, it's got to be trending negative. And that idea of, like, it should just be this conversation, let's try something, let's show you, let's solve, let's iterate.
So value through speed. And actually, Martyn, you're a technology provider. Syncing the product cycles to technology cycles. Are you seeing changes there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I want to come and just add on to what Brook was saying. I think that that conversation you have with the business, it needs to change. And I think historically, a lot of organizations have had a business about the conversation about the complexity of IT, about the people and the roles within the IT organization, about the processes that need to be followed, about the tickets that need to be raised before you can get anything done. And fundamentally, they're missing why the IT organization is there, and that is really to enable and empower the business. At SanDisk, innovation is part of what we do in the products that we sell, and we're driven very hard to make that technology innovation internally to improve the services that we offer to our business, allow them to do things faster and more cost effectively. So we're very much driven to be an agile organization.
Yeah, I'll add that there's a financial element to it, and it's this, that when you look at IT, it's typically a heavy fixed investment, and we see more and more of our customers trying to variabilize their cost structure, and that means you have to look at the term over which it's variabilized, but that's important. That's something that they're trying to move to in terms of a metric. What's that right balance? Sure. The other thing that they'll watch is discretionary versus non-discretionary, because those are levers that they can pull whenever there is a need to change due to a business condition. So I think there's some financial metrics that come into play. The other thing I would add is, if decisions are taking a long time in IT or in that collaboration with the lines of business, think about what's causing it to take a long time. Sometimes it is simply that there aren't the shared facts, and you've got to have shared facts. You've got to be on the same page. You've got to at least supplement emotion with those facts, and I think you could speed things up using that approach.
Yeah, and actually we've been bouncing around ideas for metrics around agility. And things like the ratio of OpEx to CapEx. The more OpEx you are, in theory, the more agile you are.
Yeah.
The length of the existing depreciation contracts. How long the average asset have life left in it. The shorter, the more agile. Maintenance contracts and such. So trying to figure out ways to quantify and communicate the fact that you've actually maybe spending more money, but you've added agility to the organization. Notice these are basically numbers, and they're financial. IT, the notion of value is meeting a need. That's just basic,
Yeah.
the cost to deliver something and the need that's filled. And one of the things I think IT organizations have struggled with is making the translation between what they're providing and the need that they're filling. In a sense, the business talks in financial terms, and IT talks in gigabytes and terabytes and other things that sound like they came out of Jurassic Park. So, in the flip side, though, is the business doesn't necessarily understand the possibilities that the technology provides. We need a translator between the two.
Yeah.
So I'll ask you both directions. What are you doing to educate the business on the value of the technology you provide? And what are you doing in terms of educating your IT people on what the business is that you're serving and what provides them with value? How are you helping to make the translation on both sides as this middle person?
I think it's an interesting conversation, and it actually is that. It's that key. It's not sort of metrics and trading and requirements back and forth. It's this conversation. And, I sort of take a page out of the political playbook here, and it starts with like a listening tour, right? And a stump speech, and then that conversation as those stump speeches transform, and that conversation transforms over time about what are the true needs out there, and then how do you get back there? And then that same conversation is also about sort of what's effective. How is it working, and repeating that. I think probably just our industry in general is challenged sometimes about communicating what we've done, right? And it shouldn't just be sort of uptime and values like that. It's about, hey, we solved this problem today, and how you communicate it. And I think it was earlier today, this morning, someone said that, one of the award winners, used repeating things 8 times. And I always had heard the number 3, and I was like, whoa, I am way under repeating now, and so now I'm just going to start repeating 5 more times.
Well, 5 of the times they're looking at their iPhone when you're saying
right?
it. But, yeah.
But I think it's that conversation, and I think there's definitely relationship building and embedding folks within the business so that it's not this sort of, there's no walls. It's got to be more of this conversation, and it's got to be iterative rather than sort of one time we're going to come back and listen to your requirements.
Yeah. Well, first of all, never talk to my colleagues in the business about bits and bytes. That would just be sort of,
right.
They go definitely real fast. BlackBerry's, iPhones be pulled out, right? So what we talk about is, sort of the business value and what we're trying to do to accelerate the business, transform the business, change the business. And then from a investment perspective, it has to fall into one of 3 buckets. It's either from a risk perspective, either, sort of securing the firm, protecting our data, or it will be from a operational efficiency perspective where there's an ROI, because at the end of the day, it's kind of just come back to the dollars and cents, right? Or it's an investment that's necessary to spin up a new business. So if it doesn't fall into one of these 3 categories, I call it like the nice to have, and you pay for that yourself. So.
Yeah, I think that it has to be about business benefit, and or business satisfaction. That's a terrible phrase because, of course, it means nothing to accept in the eye of the beholder, right? So you have to be very close to your business and understand what their drivers are and what's going to make them successful. But fundamentally, introducing new technology, you've got to be improving the process, improving the productivity, or enable them to do something they can't do today. And I think that's a great time for us in the IT industry because there's a big change in technology that's here from virtualization and cloud true integration that's coming. It gives us a much bigger toolkit to work with, to offer to our business customers. And one of the challenges we have is, we have virtual servers, virtual desktops, virtual storage, everything virtual. You also have the virtual CIO, and the virtual CIO is doesn't work for your company, but they're out there promoting services and ways they can improve your business. And those calls don't just come to the IT department, they come to all of your business partners. So you really need to have a close relationship and manage how you bring solutions to the table, whether they find them or they come from within the IT organization, so you can have an integrative environment within your IT team, with your organization, I mean.
So Todd, you actually have 500 or something members of the Technology Business Management Council. Do you see differences by industry or by size or by geography in terms of this value equation and the integration and the role of IT as either a utility or a partner or a disruptor?
I don't know if we see patterns by geography or size. We see patterns by maturity, and that affecting how somebody needs to be communicating and sort of making the next step in that journey. So if you're, we kind of had this model of you had an expense center as the sort of far left-hand, least mature model, and we still see a number that are in that mode. I would say that's not an adequate mode for anybody to be in. But then you have like service provider, kind of value partner. You also have IT is the business. And depending on each one, it drives sort of a different way of communicating, but it all depends on translating what you deliver into the services, applications, and business value. I mean, Harry, to your point, right? If you're speaking bits and bytes, then you're losing them. You've got to communicate in their language, which I would say is, again, two things. It's the what you deliver, and it's the how much that truly costs. If you can't say that, it's like going to a car dealer and them giving you a list of parts and how much those parts cost. It makes no sense.
Sure.
Yeah. And just to add one further point, I think it's also important to talk to your tech team in the same business terms because, you know, sort of, we've all got great technology teams and they're good at the bits and bytes.
Yeah.
But it's important that they understand what you're driving to, the business value, and how they, you know, sort of coming to work every day, how it's going to move the organization forward, how it's going to transform the organization. And by doing that, they get connected.
Sure, and actually I once put together a list of questions you could ask your technology people. Do you understand what it is you sell, what the margin is? And I was going over that with a CIO, and he said, that's great. I'm going to put a new metric on every business case. It's the pineapple metric. It's how many more cases of pineapples do we have to ship in order to pay for this system? To remind everybody that the technology has to lead to more pineapples being shipped to customers.
I had a similar conversation yesterday about a contract that we were renewing and how we chopped a chunk of change off the contract. And I turned around to my colleague and I said, do you have any idea how many hours have to be sold to net that?
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's what is the exchange rate between the technology and that which has value to the organization?
Yeah. It has to go to this. You have to see through that customer's eyes. If it's upgrading your conference rooms globally, talk me through not just the pieces and parts you're going to buy, but talk to me about that business. What's that experience? If we're building a new product to go to market, don't talk about sort of building it in AWS and all these other things. Talk about what you're actually building so you can tangibly see that result. Because, you get into these projects, infrastructure project, all this stuff, and it's like, we completed it. And my belief is no project's ever completed. It's always iterating, but you have to see it through that customer's eyes or that value's not there. If you and that customer do not have that same look at what the result should be, then you shouldn't have started the project, right? And so agreeing on that outcome first, and then going to that conversation saying, we're building this for that, and so that everybody's on the same page.
And actually, two things, one of which is, Brook mentioned that the White House, he actually was CIO of the White House, of the Executive Office of the President, and he got out before his spirit was entirely crushed. But two quick things, one of which is in politics, they say the two most important words are you and your. Whenever you're talking to somebody, you have to say this will affect you in this way, or this will affect your family or your father or your brother or whatever, and relate it, any policy, any wonky thing, to that specific person you're talking to. And then the second one is metrics. Something I've coached people on is that the alignment between technology and the business starts with an agreement on the metric. We are doing this to make something better as measured by. And if you get that alignment, the technology people know what they're building and why they're building it. The business people, and what will make the business people happy. And the business people then know, what metric they're now accountable to move.
Yeah.
So it becomes a partnership. Changing the subject a little bit, I talked a bit about agility. Innovation is a big topic. We've heard a lot about innovating. Everything here is about new innovations that are happening in science, technology, and the market. Do you have formal innovation groups in your businesses? Business innovation groups, technology innovation groups, staffed and funded?
I'll start off. I guess this is the role of the seat here, right?
Actually, let's start down at the other end.
Yeah.
So Todd, I don't know if you can speak for the TBM Council in terms of whether they actually have formal innovation programs.
You know, we see some of that, but usually the innovation programs are very much jointly tied to the lines of business and how they drive it. So some IT leaders are trying to sort of spin up their own sort of IT-led innovation, and I think that's a great idea because that organization is in a great place to see opportunities, sort of talk about the art of the possible. The question then becomes, how do you fund it? And it's difficult to just go and say, we're going to carve out part of the budget and fund this, because then the lines of business say, wait a minute, why are you funding innovation? So you have to find maybe innovative ways to fund innovation.
Yes, at SanDisk, we do have formal innovation programs throughout the company, which really encourage everybody and anybody to participate to see how they can improve the business process or bring new product ideas to the table. And really startup groups go in, formed and are funded, and they help these teams as a learning exercise to build their ideas and see if they can bring them through to fruition, whether that's an internal improvement or, as I say, a new type of product idea. And they have a lot of visibility, a lot of feedback in terms of directional feedback to these guys, and it has a lot of visibility. From an IT perspective, we also have a formal technical innovation program, and we get to review on a regular basis with part of the CEO staff for updates and directional feedback.
Yeah, so at KPMG, we've got sort of two innovation pools, if you will. So one is focused on identifying innovative and what I classify as disruptive technology, so how to do the same differently, do it better, do it smarter, do it more cost effectively, more cost efficiently, et cetera. So we've got a group who focuses exclusively on that. And then we've got a different group who do something slightly different, which is sort of look at the innovative use of technology. So whilst you sort of think about different pieces of the technology on an individual basis, they have a role to play. But then if you put them together, how's that sort of innovating the use of the technology? So it's a slightly different spin on the same topic.
At HMH, we've done a couple things. We've really sort of encouraged innovation in everyone. I particularly in my own team, I don't like the idea of having set people thinking only about innovation, because one, they're not close enough to that problem to think differently. And then, so what we've done is done something called hack stars and really done our own internal, breaking of code and thinking about things differently. And what blew my mind is sort of the idea where folks could come from different parts of the organization and think about where you thought folks that were developing on our learning platform systems, that they'd do something on the learning platform system. Some of them did it. And then we had folks who worked on the learning platform stuff innovate on SAP and show how, some of their pains of life they could do, or how you could find a conference room with an iPhone app now. And and then, you encourage this, and what we're trying to do is kind of get a little bit of a talking smack culture. So we've given the winner a 3-foot-tall tackiest trophy we could find on the internet, and give that the bragging rights so that folks can hold that up. And then it's kind of like the Stanley Cup, it travels with the champions there. So really just kind of making this a little bit more fun and sort of dialing it down. But some of those products we actually took out, or some of those trials we took out and reintroduced and are actually starting to productize it.
So please, help me here. We've got, some great resources. Are you facing any frustrations in trying to demonstrate value? What is it that's bugging you about your business colleagues? And what is it that, okay, I jumped up when you heard bugging me about my business colleagues. Whatever, please feel free to join the conversation, either with a perspective or a question for our panelists.
So my name is James Davis. I run a business architecture firm which helps companies really understand their strategies and where they're moving towards. One of the things I walk into, of course, is really helping the CIO figure out a way to communicate that value. But what he's usually dealing with right at the beginning is a level of technical debt. And to really define that technical debt is really the time to deploy and then, of course, the time to value, right? They've got these things deployed, but they don't have a way of really ushering in the value conversation. How do you guys really work with getting a project, one, deployed, but then two, obtaining the value that you've stated is going to be there?
I mean, I think it starts with that first conversation about what are you building, right? So are you trying to get market share? Are you trying to build a new platform? Are you trying to, you have to set out really crystal clear lines in the sand about what that is, right? In ed tech, we're constantly working on what is single sign-on. There are 14,000 definitions of what single sign-on is. And each definition is unique to the individual who says SSO. And so you got to get out to like, what is it and is it a success? Because I just feel like if you don't have that, if it's a recipe and you're building a cake and you need to see that cake in that book, that's why I like cookbooks with pictures, right? Because you got to see what you're building first and describe that and be able to almost taste it together with you and your business team so that you set out and have those goals together. And then you just got to get out of the way and let the people who know how to build.
Yeah, we have some customers who do some interesting things with their time data, and they'll actually measure technical debt. They'll have codes for things that people are working on that are considered technical debt, and they'll report on that, and they'll try to manage it down by doing more work up front, doing better architecture, better planning, better QA, et cetera, so that they can start to make some of those trade-offs. Like you might find that your customers or clients have ways that they can start measuring that, but it takes kind of that change up front about how they track their time.
I think there's one other angle that you might that we practice, which is sort of get off the blocks fast and make sure that the distance isn't too far that you've got to run, so that you can get a quick implementation. You can get like a toehold. You can get some users using the system, using it well, and then it becomes viral. And then it's kind of like now you got to control things, because you're getting pushed over the edge.
I think when you're shaping those big programs, you've got to avoid the technical fantasy and make sure that you are delivering very quickly. You've got to reshape those programs, and you've got to make sure you are delivering to your customers early and rethink that process, even if it takes you longer to get to the final goal, because ultimately you spend a lot of money on these programs, and the real success is not measured by, did we get the technology in? Yes, we did, we're done. It's about adoption. And if you don't get adoption to the solution and people are using it, you're never going to see the business value. So it's really important to, and I think that's a key role of the CIO, is to moderate that, that technical fantasy wonderland into something which makes sense for the business, and also doesn't take them through such a big change curve that it's not sustainable. Because adoption ultimately is the key to technical success.
Time to value. To value, rather than time to implementation, time to value. Yeah. And once you get the time to value down, linked closer to the implementation, they become inseparable.
Yeah, but sometimes if you're implementing a big ERP, you've got a big time to value.
But the toehold, again, back to putting at least something, get something up and running, learn from it, get some basic success, and then iterate. It costs you more money, costs you more time in the long run, but it mitigates the risk.
And you get some viral elements going.
Right, everybody then starts wanting it.
Absolutely.
But you benefit from, when you do those big solutions, you do your big ERP, hopefully an organization is not doing that on a regular basis. But as you go and implement that big ERP, you have an opportunity. And you have an opportunity to transform, right? Because you're going through, you're now touching all the major constituent parts of your business. You're getting to understand them very closely. You can build those relationships, and you can actually transform the culture you have even within your organization. You can kind of use that to trigger that change into that more agile, flexible organization. So they can be very important, these big technical implementations, from an internal perspective to clean house and rethink how you do business and how you serve your customer.
Yeah. And then you get that robust platform in place that you can now sort of build on.
that you can iterate on.
You could, absolutely.
Back to options. You put the platform, it buys you the options to
Yeah,
do
you
those
get the
other
foundation
things.
in and
Right.
you can put the building up.
Yeah, and actually a lot of times nobody wants to be first, but everybody wants to be second. In terms of departments implementing these things. It's like, let them do the pain of the first one. I'll do the second, I'll be second.
And preferably take all the costs as well.
Right. So you've been patiently waiting while we've been rambling.
Oh, that's fine. I'm Joanna Eldridge, and I'm with Haymanetics. And for about the last 12 years or so, I have managed HR technology in addition to other applications, but primarily HR. And I found a real challenge when it comes to communicating the value of a good quality HR system, because it's very soft, right? It's the, oh, we can manage talent better.
The employees will be happier.
Employees will be happier. And then they'll say, well, how many HR people can we let go if we upgrade the system? And it's like, well, no, it's not about that. It's maybe about realigning them so that they're adding more value. So how do you recommend coming up with a value proposition for some of these softer applications like HR and some of the other groups where it's not, you're not going to cut heads and you can't really show a quick payoff?
So how do you have happier consultants?
I'm just thinking about the question. In HR, it is going to be a soft topic, right? But you're in the talent management. You're in the, it's acquiring the talent, it's maintaining the talent, and then exiting the talent, and how to upgrade the talent that's there. So, from an HR perspective, you've got all of the above. So you've got education, you've got training, you've got onboarding, offboarding. So there's a lot of efficiency gains that can be sort of communicated through that process. And I suspect that, whilst you won't be laying people off, but you can sort of scale the organization better, get better quality out of the people, find out where their strengths are, their weaknesses are. So there's probably a lot of data that you can collect and then analyze that data and feed it back to their sort of performance managers, if you will.
As a vendor, we have to do this a lot, right? Justify the value of what we're delivering over a competitor, and a lot of times it is soft, right? Because we're not going in and saying you can lay off a bunch of people. But I think it does depend on understanding what are the processes that you're enabling and why are the features and so forth of the software or the solution needed, what kind of value do they bring qualitatively, if nothing else, right? But you have to be prepared with that, as we usually do as a vendor. There's not a perfect science, though.
Will it allow HR to do their job differently? And will they have more engagement with the employees or the managers within the organization? And ultimately, do they perform a different role and a different value in the service that they can enable?
Remove the commodity type function and allow them to move up to more of a value-added function.
And it helps from, HR technology helps from an employee of choice.
Yeah.
Sort of to be able to pick up my mobile device and to be able to look at my benefits online, or have my spouse do my benefits online, and I don't have to do that. So, so there's a lot of different soft benefits that come to the table, but ultimately helps the organization, I think, and it helps that cadence of change.
I think, Todd, my name is John Bellegarde. I've been working for product companies for about 35 years. I work for Handshake Software now. And one of you, Todd, I think just stole a little bit of my thunder, but I was about to say, software vendors are really lazy, sloppy, inaccurate, or deceptive sometimes in articulating value propositions. And who does that hurt but their CIO partners who they're selling to? Yeah. And, if you sell to them once, that's fine. But you see new generations of software come out with all these great new, soft value propositions, and it's like, run away. If you can't articulate and you're not an early adopter with a lot of cash, it's incumbent on your vendor to make it clear how you're not going to lose your job. And I just don't see enough of that in the marketplace today. Yeah. I don't know how you all feel.
I'd just say buy software as a service, because if you don't like it, you fire your vendor.
That's true, but you get it in, and you're stuck with it. I mean, you're right, you purchased it a different way, but now you're using it, it's embedded in your other applications. Yeah. It's a nice thought, but it doesn't always happen.
And so, from somebody who likes to beat up vendors, and in fact does it somewhat for a living as an analyst company, force them to talk about the metrics, rather than talking about the features. Yeah. Remember, we talked about the alignment comes in the metric. So if you understand the metric, then you understand what benefits need to be delivered to the user to move that metric. From that, you can get what features need to be put in place in order to deliver those benefits, and then that points you to the application. Vendors always want to go in the other direction. We have this application, it has these features which give you these benefits, which deliver this value.
Start at the top.
You have to come back and force them to start at the
The
top.
model's upside down.
If I spend this much money, where will I see metrics move?
Yeah.
And then what is the value of those metrics? What's the exchange rate of that metric to money so I can convey to the business what value I'm delivering by providing this new product or service?
I'll add just one more thing to that, and that is that when we engage with customers on the Apptio side and we talk about the metrics, we can talk about the ones we can help them manage, but they have to say what are reasonable targets for how they can improve upon those metrics. It has to become theirs, and we can give them examples of what other customers have done, but we can't answer that question for you, not until we're in there and doing it. So that's the only caveat to that.
And I'll second that. And we've worked with a number of vendors and built the models, the ROI models, but don't believe them. Believe the structure.
Yeah.
But the numbers in them are my numbers, or our numbers. Sorry, Mr. Microphone. You have to internalize them. You have to baseline them, even if it means calling 5 people and asking them how long it took them to do something last Wednesday. And then asking them hypothetically, if you did something, if you gave them a benefit, what would it be? If you talk to 5 people and they all tell you the same thing, you probably have a good number.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to do it. You have to make them yours. And then what is that exchange rate? You know, whether it's, $100 an hour or $1,000 a customer. Use the framework, but make them yours. And then you have a higher likelihood of getting the vendor at least to point to, and then actually, if you're ideally, you'll get them to do value-based pricing based on moving the metric.
Well, I mean, I've built those models too, but their intent is to shorten the sales cycle, not to actually deliver the model. So be skeptical.
Move to value-based pricing, and we'll share the value that we produce.
Put skin in the game even better.
Yeah.
Just give us the software for free.
So Greg, are you going to ask us about public sector? I sat with Greg over lunch.
My name is Greg Barr. I'm from Portland State in Oregon, not Maine.
The other Portland.
I talked at lunch a little bit about this with a couple of you guys. I've been doing research in the Nonprofit Association for the last year. If you think getting businesses to invest in IT, try getting nonprofits to invest in IT. I'm about to produce this big report. What would you recommend goes in as a summary to tell boards that they should invest in IS and IT to make the nonprofits more productive and it's a worthwhile expenditure?
So I'm going to first address that to Harry, because when he wants investments, he actually is taking money out of the partners' pockets to get it. And then I'll ask Brook in terms from his experience in the public sector.
Well, rather than talk about taking the, quote, money out of the partner's pocket, I will talk about the charitable side or the nonprofit, because I do have some experience in that from sort of extracurricular activities, so to speak, outside of work. And when I go back to the society that I work very closely with, sort of 10 years ago it was daunting to make contributions to them. It was really very hard. It was all paper-based. And now everything's online and it's mobile, and having been on their board for a number of years, seeing how the numbers have dramatically changed. I mean, you can look at the graph and you can see paper. Then they introduce the web, ka-ching, and then you introduce mobile, and ka-ching, and then they introduce social media, and you see ka-ching. So they're growing their funds and they're growing their fundraising by investing in technology. So there's a prime example. Happy to talk to you offline about it if you'd like.
Okay, we can talk. Thank you.
Building on kind of what Harry said, I spent some time both in political and then a little bit in nonprofit and then in government. And I would say it's absolutely that. What is the core ultimate driver of whatever nonprofit or organization it is? If it's research for disease or if it's this, there's always fundraising tied to it. And then, in the last 10, 15 years, I mean, the internet has absolutely changed that. any organization that was high dollar fundraising only, still has a small dollar contribution, and that the mechanics of this and the democratization of all this has really enabled this sort of partnership of technology being absolutely essential. And I know folks like in the Red Cross really heavily invested in technology to really make that one-to-one conversation rather than sort of make it about disasters only. And it's about sort of equating that back to what is the ultimate goal. If it's a policy-making body or something, they need funds to make that, to continue it, to make payroll. And so technology, I think, is really the key equalizer in that and making that organization grow.
So actually, I'll just tell one small story, and I'll turn it and ask if you have any towards this that's different. Over the last weekend, I played in a benefit hockey game. We started at 8:30 on Thursday night and played 24 hours a day for 3 days. We ended up with roughly 200, I played 6 hours of goalie, so it's like I was just lame for about 3 days. But we ended up with about 190 players, $25,000 in contributions from 25 states and 9 countries. And this is just a little group of guys in Ridgefield, Connecticut, who saw something that was done in Alberta and said, this is a cool model, let's duplicate it. And grassroots put this up, put the website up, started emailing, email to email, Twitter, social media, and through friends of friends, and PayPal as the cloud-based donation vehicle, we were literally 25 states and 9 countries supporting our craziness for 3 days of playing hockey. So, if we can do it just with no investment in technology, imagine if we actually had, some infrastructure. And actually next year, the trick is how are we actually going to scale that by 4 or 5 times? Because now we know the possibilities.
But you'll probably make an investment. Somebody will
make an investment. We're going to have to make an investment in it because we now see the possibilities. We see the opportunity, and now we can start matching the opportunity to the possibilities, and to take this and go a bit broader. So hopefully those are some ideas. I don't know which of you was standing sooner, but.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing up the topic of value-based pricing, and that's really central to my question, and maybe I can carry the conversation slightly further. You've been talking a lot about the metrics of value, the perception of the customer about value, how you create an exchange rate based on value, and how specifically we're creating technologies that give benefits today that didn't exist yesterday. So my specific question is, how would one approach a value-based pricing strategy for something that doesn't currently exist, that they don't have a metric to say, our customers in turn will create this metric of value on this new product, on this new service? How does one approach that and make a proposal for a strategy and a pricing model that is centrally based on value for something that doesn't currently exist yet?
Now, when you say pricing strategy, pricing for what? For an internal service delivered by the technology organization or for external products?
So whether it's a new service or whether it's a new product based on your new technology offering.
Yeah. I mean, I'll answer it this way, that first of all, we see very few organizations that truly do value-based pricing for their services or products per se, if they call them products. And the reason is typically IT is bound to charge back 100%, no more, no less, or there isn't chargeback, so there might be some other way of doing allocations or whatever, but typically there's a constraint that prohibits them from really doing a true value-based pricing. But it doesn't prohibit you from showing how the unit cost or unit rate of a service compares to similar, maybe third-party options, for example. We see that a lot, so that if you're at least communicating the rates of your services in those terms and people can see the difference between quantity and rate, they know how quantity is driving the overall cost, but they see that unit rate, then that at least starts to sort of get them to understand the value in context of other options. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
And actually, again, towards the same notion, value-based pricing involves risk sharing. So where are you going to find it? You're not going to get Oracle to change their pricing model because you want them to share the risk. Their entire compensation structure, their entire asset base is completely based on licensing, which is why they have so much trouble even getting into the cloud. But on the other hand, when you think about innovation, there's a number of roles. There's the inventor and the transformer and the financier. So if you can give money to a startup, in a sense, to be their pilot customer, to get the use of the technology and a piece of equity, conceivably you are getting value-based pricing there. The greater that's value that's created in that startup, the more value the more your organization or your company will benefit from it. Likewise, they have a first customer. So together, you're giving them value in the feedback loops and the exposure and the reference. You're getting potentially a piece of the equity. I know that model worked for three large companies in the Cincinnati area. You can figure out what three large companies are in the Cincinnati area. Each who put $1 million into an innovation tool startup company. And they built a commercial product that they had the use of internally, and then that company took that tool and marketed into the private sector. So they needed it. They knew the people who could deliver it. They worked with those people, the three of them, to get the tool that met their needs. They got value. They got equity. The other company got a product.
If I'm Bittaker, my company's been trying to socialize this idea of evidence-based management in software organizations, which at the core is about measuring the value that IT contributes to the business. What we find is that in some organizations, the notion that business outcomes is a way to measure IT value is understood. In many organizations, we get a lot of pushback where people feel that their influence on business outcomes is only indirect in IT. What would you say to those objections?
I know the answer, but I'll ask them.
I mean, I think there is no business without IT anymore, right? The business doesn't exist without IT. In my world, you can't write content, produce content, or deliver content to a customer without technology. And I'd say that across the board. So the idea that, I think we as an organization, as an industry, have to stop thinking about sort of we support people. We are the business now. We're part of it. And to whatever degree that may be is different, but I would still say that there is no company, name a company off the top of your head that is so successful without IT.
Yeah. So sometimes you have to take a risk with IT. Sometimes you have to say, this sounds like a really good business idea, let's go do it. A real good technical solution, let's go do it. And sometimes those investments don't pay off, so those happen. But like you just said, it's kind of like what company doesn't run on IT? It's kind of, at lunch today, we were chatting with a couple of colleagues at the table, and what's the business value of IT? It's infinite, because when the servers stop, the company stops, whether it's a not-for-profit or it's any industry you like.
I think if you're getting pushback on business outcomes, then you need to double-click on those business outcomes, Brian. You can't, if that outcome is your ability to deliver a product, that might make sense. What might not make sense is the customers are going to buy it, right? So I think you've got to be specific about what business outcomes means that the IT solution and technology can influence.
If you want a little buzzword to pick up on what Brook said, My colleague John McCarthy at Forrester had a brilliant, just little catchphrase, and that is that software is your brand. I don't care what business you're in, software drives your brand. It drives how your customers engage with you. It drives how your internal people engage with your customers. It drives how you make your product and marketing decisions and pricing and distribution decisions. If two people in your organization answer the same question from a customer with two different answers, that customer will never trust you again. They will never know whether or not the answer they're getting is the right one. So the infrastructure you put in place to share information and to deliver that information to the customer is your brand. It is nothing less.
Internally and externally.
Yeah,
Internally and externally. It
absolutely.
is your company. Your company is the software that you run, because that, in fact, drives everything else about, the customer engagement.
And one last point, it's not just the software, it's the actual technology infrastructure that goes behind it. So it's all of it together that makes it work.
It's manifested, yeah.
Yes.
The reason I said software is that's the sort of the point of engagement.
The layer.
No, I understand that. The traders would always call me when the system went down, but it could have been the server on the back end.
Yeah, they know they pushed the button on the software and it didn't work.
Exactly, but it's
So
all of it.
I don't know if that'll
together.
help, but that's just the software is your brand.
Yeah.
And this is what we're talking about. That's the value of everything we produce, is the value of the brand.
And I think some companies aren't there yet to realize
Absolutely
that.
not. But they have to be, because if they're not, somebody else will learn this. Somebody else will use the big data stuff and deliver on the software a new product or service and disrupt your market.
But that's the exciting part about being in this industry right now. I mean, that's the opportunity.
Mm-hmm. So we have just time, I think, for two more questions. You're standing, so you'll get the last two, I think.
Great, I'll be quick. I'd like to ask Mr. Tucker if any of his members are achieving innovation in a cost-constrained environment. That is, we talk about Google and Apple and DARPA. That's highly idealized and has to be fostered, money, talent, best and brightest. I work for Fortune 50 Financial out of New York. We have layoffs every quarter. We're doing what amounts to a total talent refresh over the next 5 years to North Carolina, nearshoring. So I'll throw a bone to my Red Sox fans. The Yankees are competitive because they have a $200 million payroll every year. So we don't have that. I have to play small ball. How do you innovate?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll give you a story in your industry. One of our customers is in the title insurance business, and as you can imagine, that business has had some tough times lately. And during their downturn, that question came up, and the CIO had to answer the question, how do I drive innovation and growth at a time when my overall ability to spend has come down? And what he did is he put it to his business partners, the executive leadership team, but he did so in a way where he used a transparent view into how they were spending their money, and they had joint decisions about what should be cut. And they looked very hard at things that really weren't customer facing, and they said, look, we shouldn't be doing those things. And they looked at things that were maybe being done for a specific business unit. They cut out those things, made them standardized, and they found room. And to the tune of millions of dollars, several percentage points on an IT budget. I think that was a great story, but it takes that kind of hard trade-offs when your overall business is declining.
And actually, what did you do in 2009? I think every business went through this. So do you gentlemen, you were nicely ensconced in government, insulated from all of this. But for the two gentlemen in the middle, obviously, we went through this pressure in 2008, 2009. Do you have any stories of how you maintained or justified your technology budgets through that time when everyone was trying to retain cash?
Challenging.
So you sympathize.
It is, and I was in financial services then, so it was challenging times, and because you don't want to cut the bone out, right? And memories are very short term, right? So if you say, well, we can reduce this cost, and take this out, and then the network goes down, well, it's like, well, you never told me that. Yes, we did. So you got to be really, you're playing with fire when you're getting into that cost-cutting mode. So you got to be really very careful.
Tell him.
And then it's super hard to innovate.
Yeah.
Sort of innovating in those times, in those types of situations are sort of, it's almost on a volunteer basis. It's almost like the enthusiasm has to spur that innovation, where, you know, it's at night and at weekends.
Yeah, I would also say that you have to buy the options so that when the environment changes, you're ready to jump on it quickly.
Yeah.
That would be somewhat, you know, that rather than investing in things, you're investing in futures.
Yeah.
You're buying the option to do something or react faster.
And I think
assets. Yeah.
And I think sort of rebalancing the portfolio and seeing how you can sort of run the firm to how you can move dollars to change the firm. There's always options for doing that.
Yep.
It's just how far do you want to push that envelope?
That's right. Yeah.
The last question is yours.
All right, thank you very much. I actually contemplated saying my name 8 times after what you had mentioned, but I'll just do it once. Joe Crowley, UMT 360. It's been our experience that a lot of companies talk about when they do a business case submission, they're looking at demand for IT and what they should be investing in, and they look at some business drivers that they may have calculated, and then they take the ROI and they kind of hold it there, but it's never really, there's no benefits realization framework that's really established. Maybe it is loosely as a process, but it's not coupled with the tool where they can go back and actually look, are they getting the value from this investment, or are they executing well against what they should have, and do they change their course? Do they dynamically allocate funds away from those initiatives, investments, applications, or whatever they are, and then move them towards another optimized, investment concept within the portfolio that they may have had teed up? I mean, have you ever experienced that? Do you have a benefits realization framework set up with a tool where you can analyze these things on the fly and think about tactical and dynamic decisions?
I do. It's 12 words and 4 blanks. I'll be really very simple. The one-sentence business case. We are doing blank to make blank better as measured by blank, which is worth blank. Get agreement on that. I mean, you're going to have 80 pages of analysis in 6 months, but when you finally fund the project, write that one-sentence business case. We are going to do blank, here's how we're going to measure it, here's when we're going to measure it, overall depreciation rate. But take it down to that. We're going to do blank to make blank better as measured by blank, which is worth blank. Anytime you talk about the project, talk about it in that whole sentence. Every project status report, put it on the top of it. Every stage gate, review the assumptions that went into those numbers and find out if anything has changed and whether the which is worth equation is still there. Talk about it in terms of your quarterly report. Next quarter, we are releasing this product, which will make this better as measured by this. And by the way, when you say that, the eyes will shift to the person who's responsible for that metric. Do you have your training in place? Do you have the change management in place? Are you ready for this? Are the assumptions still there? Simple statement, simple tool, but I think part of that is back to how do we unite the business and the technology? And that might just be one little takeaway. Think about putting in something that's that transparent and using it to drive all of the communications about what you're doing. So
fully support that, but I think you also have to have a solution, a platform, which takes all that data so that when you go and make that business case, and then 6 months later, 12 months later, you can actually run the same model, and it can show how things have now changed factually, not just a spreadsheet.
Right. How are we going to measure it? When are we going to measure it? Right.
You have to see all the pieces of the stack, so to speak. So you can see what was the software layer, the maintenance layer, the network layer, the server layer. You have to be able to see the whole stack. This was the cost, and here's now the cost, factually.
And look at it through those customers' eyes, right? Through that user story that you started with, and the different story points so that you can match back to that to say, this is why we're here. And this was the outcome that we set out to do. Similar to starting with that sentence.
Right. And actually, in Todd, I probably could talk for days in terms of how Apptio can help expose the costs through the stack of these services. They are a sponsor of the conference. They actually do have a solution to help expose some of those numbers and give the facts. I'll put the plug in for you there.
Thank you, yeah.
Martyn, any final words?
I'd say that if you don't look at your forecasts and how you actually performed, you'll never get any better. So you're never going to improve. Forecasting and estimating where you think you will be and the benefits you think it will bring to your organization is just that. It's an estimated guess. It's teamwork, and it's not just an IT thing. It's how the business work with you to make it happen. And if you don't sit around and look at it, you won't expect a different result next time around.
Yeah. So I guess on that note, I'd like to thank both my panelists and the audience for a fascinating discussion. We hope we gave you some interesting and useful ideas, and I think we're all going to be around for a bit if you'd like to talk and get some more stories or some more hints or have any of us expand on any of the things we've said. So thank you.
Thank you.